Hello friends, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about my best, top, most used makeup brushes in my makeup collection. And yeah, I love all of these brushes and I use them on a regular basis. I highly recommend these. Most of them are affordable brushes. I do have some brushes that are in this mix that are not super affordable, but they are still like not too crazy overpriced. I have quite a lot of brushes to talk about, and maybe you wouldn't need every single one of these to, do your makeup every single day, but I use different brushes for different things, and I think all of these have a place in your makeup collection depending on what products you're using and if you're doing a full face of makeup or not. This first brush has been a longtime favorite of mine and I use it every single day, but this is the e.l.f. flat top powder brush, and I like to use this to set my foundations with powder. I also like to use this for like powder foundation application. You can like buff it in almost like a kabuki brush because this is a really densely packed brush there. You could also use this brush to apply liquid foundation. I don't normally use a brush to apply my foundations. I usually use a makeup sponge, and I love the Wet n Wild makeup sponge. That is my go-to. I also really like the Paw Paw makeup sponges. This is a little bit deformed because I had it crammed in a drawer over here. But these are super affordable and really great as well. So I know that's not a brush, but that's normally what I use for my foundation. Another brush that's good for foundation application is this brush here. It's also like a flat top brush. This one's a little bit smaller, so maybe like if you prefer a smaller brush for foundation application, this comes in an Amazon brush set that is super affordable. It's $10 or less depending. Sometimes they do sales on the makeup brush set, but it comes with 18 quality brushes, and a lot of the brushes I'm going to talk about today come from this set. I think it is such an amazing set, and those of you guys that have purchased this set from my recommendation talk about how much you love it. So highly recommend this set. I'll have all the brushes that I'm talking about today listed and linked down in the description box, but this is my ultimate favorite powder brush for, really just mattifying your foundation and setting everything. If I want something that's like a little bit more loose for setting powder, like if I'm using a luminous setting powder, this is normally the brush that I reach for, or if I'm using a loose setting powder. So this is also another e.l.f. makeup brush, and this is their large powder brush. And this brush is really big. It's the biggest one in my makeup collection, but it's really great for just dusting, doing like a light dusting of powder all over the face. This is also really good for bronzing as well, like if you want a really diffused bronzer look. So sometimes I will use it for bronzer, but mostly for loose setting powders and also like pressed luminous setting powders, because I just find that this can apply like luminous setting powders to concentrated, and I like for it to be like a little bit more diffused and buffed. So love this e.l.f. brush. Okay, this next brush I like to use for setting under eye concealer. This is the Sigma Tapered Highlighter F35. So this is a little bit more expensive makeup brush. I love Sigma brushes. I know that they are a little bit more expensive, but I have had some in my makeup collection for years. Like I've bought this one, I believe in 2018. So she's going strong, and I wash it quite often. I don't have any issues with shedding or anything like that. I think Sigma is a really great brand. It's been around forever. So I like to use that for under eye setting. And I know that this is like a highlighter type of brush, and sometimes I do use it for highlighter, but I mainly use it for under eye setting. I like that it's fairly dense, but it's not like too crazy dense. So yeah, it just applies setting powder so nicely to the under eye area. Another tool that I like to use to set my under eyes are these triangle makeup sponges, and sometimes I'll use this for like powder setting all over the face as well. I know this is not a brush, but these are super affordable on Amazon. You can get like a pack of I think like 6 maybe. But I mainly use this to set like the under eyes, or sometimes at the end of my makeup, once I've done like my setting spray and everything, I might lightly go in with powder and just kind of set the T-zone area. But I also wanted to mention the sponge because I use it quite often to set the under eyes. Sometimes I don't always use this, but I do like that for under eye setting. Then for blush, I have several makeup brushes that I like to use for different types of blushes. So this is the Morphe M241, and this is actually their angled bronzing brush. And I've never used this for bronzing, but I could see where this would be a pretty good bronzing brush. It's just like a little more dense than I would want for a bronzer brush. I usually like something a little bit more loosely packed for that, but like if you really wanted to get in there and do some good contouring, I think this would be a good brush for that. But I love this for blush application. I love how plush it is. You can really just get in there and apply your blush. And I love a good angled brush for blush application because it just fits so nicely there on your cheekbones. And I love these new Morphe brushes. I've bought several of these, and this is one of my favorites. I use it every day. And if I want maybe a angled brush that's slightly smaller for blush application, so as you can see, this other one is quite a bit smaller. This is the Sigma Large Angled Contour Brush, the F40. This is also great for blush application. So if I want maybe a little bit more lighter application and a little bit more precise, I'll go in with this one. This works well with like really pigmented blushes because you can apply a little less concentrated and you can be a little bit more precise with it. So I like that brush as well, but like if I could only have one in my collection, it would definitely be the Morphe one. Now I'm going to talk about some other brushes that I like to use with liquid or cream blush products. So this is another one from that Amazon brush set that I mentioned with like that flat top brush. And this is their angled flat top brush. And I love to use this for liquid blush application. It works really well. This could also work as a foundation brush. It's got the same amount of denseness as just like their flat top brush in that set. It's just that this one over here is slightly angled. I mean, I feel like it's really hard to see on camera, but it's just ever so slightly like angled across. So I love this for liquid blush application. And then this brush here is newer to my collection, but it works so well with liquid cheek stains, and this also works well with liquid blush application as well. This is the e.l.f. Stain and Tint blending brush, and this one is like one of those angled type of brushes. So I don't know, it's a little bit more precise than this brush, and I use this quite often. So another great blush brush. Okay, so now I'm gonna move on to bronzer brushes that are my faves. The Sigma Large Powder F30 is my go-to bronzer brush. I love this for applying bronzer up at the hairline. It's like kind of precise, like it's a little bit more pinched, but at the same time it's like big and fluffy. So you can get a precise application, but then also buff really nicely with it. So this is my go-to bronzer brush. If I only had one in my collection, it would be this one. If I'm applying liquid bronzers or contours, this angled brush here, which is from that Amazon brush set, I like to use this. It's like a little bit more precise, but the dome shape of it helps the product to blend out nicely. So you can get a precise application, but also, you know, buff it out. So that's my go-to for that. And then if I want a more concentrated, so like if I'm doing a contour, the Real Techniques 200 brush is the brush that I use for that. It really gets in there, and because it is more densely packed, it's very precise, but it's kind of like the Sigma brush in that shape, like where it fans out, and so you can get a good like buff on it. So for highlighting, my main highlighting brushes, the Real Techniques 402 brush. This one is not super dense, so you can just really buff out a highlighter if you want like a more lighter application of it. I also use this brush sometimes for setting under eye concealer. And then the Morphe M164. This is another great brush for highlighter application. This is a bit more dense than the Sigma one. They are very similar in shape. The Sigma one's just like a little bit more tapered, not quite as dense. This was the Sigma F35 I talked about earlier for setting under eye concealer. This this Morphe one could also be good for under eye setting, but it is a little bit bigger, as you can see. Like this one just fits the under eye a little bit more precisely than the Morphe one. So that's why I like this one for buffing highlighters. So, okay, now I'm gonna move on to my favorite eyeshadow brushes. And a lot of them come from that Amazon brush set. So that is why I just think that set is so worth it, because I use so many of those brushes every day, and I especially love the eyeshadow brushes in that set. So I'm gonna talk about those first, and then I'll talk about some of the other eyeshadow brushes that I use on an everyday basis that are not in that set. I have 7 brushes here. I think pretty much all of the eyeshadow brushes from that Amazon brush set I use regularly. I love this brush here for applying eyeshadow primer. It just really it's like a little bit more dense. This would also be a good little brush for applying under eye concealer, but I just feel like you can really get into the corner of your eye and just blend everything out. Then these 3 blending brushes are really nice. I kind of use them interchangeably for just blending in my crease. I do like this one, however, for blending in the outer V because it is a bit more pinched. I love pinched eyeshadow brushes for applying outer V color because I usually stamp the color like this and then like that and then just like buff it out, where these ones are just good for just blending the crease. This one's a little bit more precise because it is a bit more flat there, and this one's a little bit more dome shaped, but I use those pretty much the same way. They work relatively the same in application, but these brushes are very nice for eyeshadow like crease blending. And then these 2 brushes from that set, I love these 2 for applying lid shades. So this one's a little bit more precise, and I think these are both kind of like concealer brushes from the set, but I really love these for applying shades on your eyelid. So this one can get really nicely in the inner corner of the eye because it is like pointed. So, but yeah, they both work really well for that. And then this brush here, it did break. That's the only brush that broke in the set, but this used to have a little spoolie on the end. But I love this other side for blending out eyeshadow at the lash line because it is a little bit more thick here than like a more precise angled brush. Like for instance, this one here from Morphe, this one's a little bit more thin, as you can see, where the one from the Amazon brush set is a bit more thick. So I hope you can see how that one from the Amazon brush set is just like a little bit thicker than the Morphe one here. But I like that this is thicker because it gives you a more smokier look there at the lash line if you're smoking out eyeshadow. And this also works really well for smoking out colors here on the lower lash line. So I love that brush for that. Okay, and then some other eyeshadow brushes that I cannot live without. This Morphe M332. This is an amazing brush for blending out the crease, but also blending out the outer V. So this is very versatile. I feel like this is an all-in-one brush. You can also apply eyeshadow to your eyelid really nicely because it is a little bit flat there like a shader brush, but it's pinched. So it's really good for the outer V. And at the same time, it's like fluffy too for blending, you know, your crease color. So I use this pretty much on a daily basis, and I've loved this brush ever since I bought it. So highly recommend that one. And then a few other Morphe brushes that I love for eyeshadow application. The M303. This is also a great brush for applying shadow on the eyelid. It's a little bit more like fluffy than some of these more flat shader brushes that I use from the Amazon brush set. So this could also blend a little bit in the crease and outer V. I don't use this one quite as much, but it is a really good brush for eyelid application. And it's also a really great brush for a one and done eyeshadow application, since you can get in the crease and outer V a little bit. Then the Morphe M401. This has like the angled brush on one side and the spoolie on the other. And I love this for doing a brows. You know, if you're using like a powder brow product. I like how precise this is, and this also works really well for like gel eyeliners or also smoking out the lash line if you want something a little bit more precise. So I do use this brush pretty often. I wouldn't say I use it every single day, but I use it most days, especially to like comb out my brows and everything. And then this brush here is another great one and done eyeshadow brush. This is from Real Techniques, and this is the medium shadow brush. So since it is kind of fluffier, it's great for blending in the outer V and in the crease, but also applying the lid shade. So this is why it's so great for a one and done. Then these three eyeshadow brushes, I use these pretty much every single day. This is the Sigma E30, and this is my favorite brush for applying shadow to the lower lash line. It's just like a pencil brush, and I don't know what it is about this brush, but for me, it's magical for blending out shadow on the lower lash line. It's precise, but at the same time blends things out really well. So I cannot do my makeup without this brush. So I love that. Anytime I'm doing anything on the lower lash line, I'm using that brush. And then the Sigma E25 blending. This is my favorite outer V crease brush. It's just so perfect. It's pinched and fluffy. So those are like my favorite brushes for outer V blending, but this just blends so nicely, and I use it anytime I'm doing like outer V for the most part. I mean, sometimes I'll just stick to the Morphe M332 for that, but this Sigma one is definitely a go-to. And then my last brush that I'm going to talk about today that I use pretty much every single day is this e.l.f. little angled brush. This is the Defining Eye brush. I got this out of an e.l.f. brush set, and it's still available, so I'll have it linked down below. I wish that you could purchase this by itself because I don't really use any of the other brushes from that set, but I like using this to apply shadow to my brow bone, and also it's so great for getting like an inner corner highlight. Like it fits so nicely in there. So that's what I use that brush for. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this in-depth video today, me going over all of my favorite makeup brushes and what I use them for. If you enjoyed this, give this video a thumbs up. Let us know down in the comments if you use any of these brushes and if you also enjoy them, or if you have other makeup brushes that you would recommend. Let us know down in the comments, but I hope that you all have a great day. If you have any other video requests for me, let me know. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.